You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome into another 3-Mod podcast. I am John Kurtz, joined by Cole Manbeck, former beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury, Derek Young of KSO fame, and it sounds like I'm a little more upbeat this week. That's because I sure as hell am. Look, you can accuse us of a lot of things, all right? Being right is rarely one of them, and unfortunately, we were very much not correct about this game and the injury situation and pretty much everything we talked about last week for K-State football, because the Cats knock off a top 10 team, Oklahoma State, 48-0. Yes, 48-0. What did I see? That was the largest margin of defeat for an unranked team against a top 10 team in AP poll history. This goes all the way back to the 1930s. So hell of a little accomplishment for the Cats on Saturday, huh? I mean, as negative as I was last week, I literally do not know that there is one single thing that I can complain about from the entire day. Is there one single thing we can complain about from the entire game? Officiating, maybe. Echo Boydo, got screwed a handful of times. That's Tim Brando's tweets, but that's about it. I don't really have anything else to complain about from yesterday.
Yeah, Echo Boydo might be like the most unfairly judged player in that entire game, at least from an officiating standpoint. I think, dude, they could have called OPI, offensive pass interference, on the guy that he was defending probably 3 or 4 times if they wanted to, and instead he got a defensive pass interference call somehow. I still am a bit flabbergasted by that turn of events. And I also wanted to point out, in defense of the 3-Mile podcast, we did have one guy pick a Kansas State win.
That's true.
Hello, everyone. Positive Cole has come through once again, while the negative Nellies over here, John and DY, predicted an L. And we're going to continue that trend because we want DY to be wrong again, and that's been a productive trend for Kansas State.
And to survive. I don't think I would. I think my head would be on a post if I picked Kansas State to win this week. So
you can already book it up that he's picking Texas, and DY, you're going to have to sell it that you really believe that it's going to be
Texas. I know. I will. Yeah. Don't you worry about that. In fairness, too, if we look back in our preseason preview, like when we went game by game before the year even began, I had Kansas State at 7-1 right now, with their only loss being to TCU. So I am not that wrong when I looked at things before the season. The only game I got wrong was Tulane.
I mean, we all predicted K-State to beat Oklahoma in Norman and to beat Oklahoma State. John and I had K-State losing to Iowa State. The roadmap to get here was all a little bit different. None of us had the Tulane game happening, but at the end of the day, you're 4-1 in the Big 12. I think all of us take it. And from a prediction standpoint, John, you saw Brody yesterday, my 5-year-old. Brody told me, and I have it on video, when I asked him for a score prediction, he said 44-0 K-State before the game. And I'm like, Brody, there is no way that's happening. And it's sitting at 41-0. And he's like, let's kick a field goal. I'm going to get it right. And DJ Giddens punches it in. But I mean, that kid is my good luck charm. So
man. He was, yeah. Well, at one point when I first asked him, at one point he was even thinking like 96-12 or something like that.
He's got the Cats by 90 in his head, guys.
Yeah, so. Which legitimately, I mean, almost was there. Felt like that was there for the taking if they really wanted it.
Another half, and
yeah, it was out there. There are a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have great stories from the day. I will just say that shout out to our guy Chris Nelson, who does some work for you at K-State Online. Generally, if you guys think I was a little negative last week, love Nelly to death, but in our group chat, he tends to be the most negative, very negative sometimes. But I sat next to him the entire game, and not a peep of negativity. We had nothing to complain about. There was like literally nothing, again, outside of a couple of flags. There was no negative Nelly at all. So it was I never thought I would see the day, but it was a freaking blast. I mean, I can't tell you how much fun that was to be in the stands for that. Had some great seats that I was given to. Shout out to my guy Don, who hooked me up with tickets. Just a perfect day all the way around, man.
Splitting hairs here, but I think the only ounce of negativity that I could perhaps conjure Nothing on the defensive side. And the offense, again, like I said, splitting hairs. You're going to take 48 points against Oklahoma State in any venue at any point in any season. You're not going to feel bad about it. But as good as they were in winning 48-0, Will Howard still missed a couple guys wide open. They had a couple of things schemed up too, like the wheel route to Deuce Vaughn, where it got interrupted just because the timing was off due to a blitz that got home to Howard, and he had to deliver the ball before he wanted to. They had to schemed up that touchdown to Will Swanson early in the game. I think they still scored on the drive, so I'm not sure that it necessarily mattered, but he dropped the ball, which wasn't a perfect throw by Will Howard, but a catchable ball. So there was other opportunities there for the taking for Kansas State that they didn't even execute on. I think they were the recipient of a poor Oklahoma State performance. I think Mike Gundy pointed that out, but that was also, from an execution standpoint, the best I had seen Kansas State probably in my time covering the team since 2017.
Yeah, so I'm going to hop in here because I watched last night the entire Mike Gundy postgame press conference. I don't know if you guys did.
Yeah, I did.
It was very interesting because I think a lot of what you can attribute this to, and I had people ask me after the game, like, man, how did that happen? How did K-State just house a top 10 team 48-0? And I really think you got to start with the coaching staffs here, because Gundy went out of his way to, he did the right thing in putting it basically all on himself. And he said he apologized to the team for not having them prepared. But so both teams, right, were facing this injury conundrum going into the game. We know K-State's situation. Oklahoma State was in a very similar situation. And we did discuss that, where they were without like 6 starters against Texas. Spencer Sanders has been banged up. Well, Gundy said he changed the way that they practiced this past week. And he wouldn't get into specifics, but basically insinuated that they just didn't practice guys.
He made it sound like they didn't practice, right?
Well, yeah, he made it sound. I heard Kleiman at one point in the last couple of weeks was talking about just backing off a lot of guys, and it was TCU. It was after TCU. He said we might tweak some things, and just practice more normally instead of backing off too much. It feels like Mike Gundy seemed to be saying I backed off too much on my guys in practice this past week because of the injury situation, and it didn't work out. Whereas Kleiman seemed to be a little bit ahead of the curve, where K-State may have done some of that going into TCU, and then the bye week, obviously before that, trying to get guys healthy, and then said, well, look, forget that. Let's trash it and move on. And beyond that, talking about coaching advantages and what they did, just to be able to scheme around the trouble that they're having at linebacker health-wise right now was amazing. Amazing to pitch one of the best defensive performances we've seen from K-State in a conference game. If we're talking about Cole, this is where I need Cole to help me with the stats, but an offense that weren't they top 5 in the country in scoring offense, Oklahoma State, and you shut them out? That ranks near the top of K-State Big 12 defensive performances.
They were definitely up there in points per game, points per drive. They were 34th in the country, so not nearly as high from an efficiency standpoint, but it's still an electric offense. And when you consider the fact that Oklahoma State, from a pace perspective, was 4th in the country in plays per minute, at 2.9 per minute, which was tops in the Big 12, and you shut a team out that's running that type of a pace of offense, that's incredible. And they were only on the field for 63 plays, a season low. And what did we talk about going into that game? Is, Kansas State would have to find some ways to sustain drives. Defense without Daniel Green, you got to keep plays at a minimum for that defense. And Kansas State was able to do that. And the defensive performance was as good as I've seen in a long time. And that is now the 4th game out of 8 that K-State has held an opponent without a touchdown. I'm not counting Missouri's touchdown on the last play of the game. I'm just not. So you think about it, South Dakota's a shutout. Missouri scores 12. They get the garbage touchdown on the last play. Iowa State kicks 3 field goals, and Oklahoma State gets shut out. It's so difficult to shut anybody out in this league. And even maybe late in the third quarter, my dad had made a comment to me I was sitting next to, when was the last time a Mike Gundy team got shut out? And I said, well, we're not going to shut them out, Dad. They're going to, K-State's going to start playing some backups soon. They'll eventually get a touchdown or 2. And the defense just kept stepping up. Whoever was on the field just made plays all over the place. So it was really remarkable performance. And, that's the first time Mike Gundy, from a shutout perspective, has been shut out since 2009, Oklahoma State, in a 27-9 or 27-0 loss to Oklahoma. And K-State held Oklahoma State to an incredible 3.4 yards per play, which is the lowest since 2009 in that OU game as well. Just doesn't happen in the Big 12, and it particularly doesn't happen against a Mike Gundy coach team. So that was one of the more shocking performances that I've seen from a K-State defense. Not that the defense isn't good. We know the defense is good, but without Daniel Green to do that, that was incredible.
And without Khalid Duke for the first half as well. So I think you have to put that on top of it. And if you look at the Big 12 metrics, especially in Big 12 play, Kansas State's probably a hair past Iowa State, maybe for number one defense in the Big 12. If you take everything into consideration, those two are neck and neck. That performance might have gave Kansas State the upper hand in terms of how the season has unfolded. I wanted to kind of shed light on a few more things in addition to what Cole shared and provided. Oklahoma State also pretty known for a good rushing attack, especially with Spencer Sanders at quarterback. He's a pretty elusive mobile guy. They had 54 yards on 30 carries. That's pretty, I mean, obviously not the same type of guy, but it's almost kind of emblematic of what they did to Ricky Williams that 1 year, right? A bunch of hype coming into that game of what that Texas offense could do with Ricky Williams, and they shut him down. A little bit different scenarios, but similar performance, I would imagine. And then just kind of going back to the yards per play stuff and everything that core. Here's an interesting stat I thought. Oklahoma State didn't have, because this kind of shows how it was a complete performance, start to finish, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Oklahoma State didn't have a quarter where they got 100 yards, not one quarter. They were under 100 yards in each of the four quarters. They only had 16 yards in the second quarter. 16 yards in the second quarter, 1.8 yards per play in the second quarter for Oklahoma State. So I thought that was very interesting. Like Cole said, 3.4 yards per play on the day, but they had three quarters where they were under 4 yards per play.
Did they even get inside the K-State 30 in that game?
No, I saw someone say, now this was just a tweet from someone on K-State Twitter. I saw someone say they didn't get inside the K-State 34 the entire game.
I mean, I think their best drive was Gundy at the end in at quarterback when he threw the interception that Crew Jackson picked off. And I don't think they were probably within the K-State 35 at that point.
The final drive of the game that Oklahoma State had was on the Kansas State 32, but they had
I think that's it. I mean, there was not a time where they really threatened to score, right? I mean,
just the play where Brendan Presley got stripped by Austin Moore. They were, about to get into the K-State like 35, but man, how about the K-State linebackers?
Dude, guy.
So first of all, Austin Moore, he's incredible. And Brock Heward talked him up on the broadcast. I've only gotten to rewatch the first half so far. Shout out to our guy, Brock Heward. He's the best there is in the business at calling college football games. But Austin Moore making that play 30 yards downfield, stripping the ball. And then I got to give a lot of credit to Nick Allen. I was critical of Nick Allen's play at TCU. Chris Kleiman praised him at the press conference this week. Fifth-year senior, came off a torn ACL, and I thought he was terrific. I thought Oklahoma State may be able to expose him. To be fair, Oklahoma State was without their starting running back, Dominique Richardson. But still, I mean, the Nixon kid had 8 carries for 64 yards last week against Texas. And they couldn't get anything going against K-State. K-State's linebackers played great. Gavin Forche, Jake Clifton. I thought Jake Clifton really flashed, guys. I mean, I think as a true freshman, the future is bright for that kid.
I would agree. And just to kind of go back, they were inside a Kansas State 40-yard line, looks like 3 times. So it was when they threw the interception, the last drive was on the 32, as I already originally indicated. First drive of the game, they got to the 38 when they turned it over on downs. They went forward on the 4th down. They were at the Kansas State 38-yard line. And then when they fumbled it, when Austin Moore punched it out, that was at the Kansas State 18.
Okay, so I guess it just depends on if you want semantics, whether or not you want to count the fumble play. But I mean, it's insane. And I mean, it was just I mean, DY, first of all, you had a different view than I was in row 6. So like I was pretty up close and personal. I'm not getting a great view of how things are breaking down, but like schematically, how did they do this? Like Crew Jackson, Jake Clifton had to play some. Crew Jackson, I know, was at the end of the game, but like using Jake Clifton, they didn't have Khalid Duke for the first half, and we're just absolutely dominant. Schematically, how exactly did this happen when we thought linebacker was going to be just such a huge hole?
My guys just played better, really. I don't think that they really changed up whole much schematically. Even Mike Gundy said their defense did what they showed that they've done all season on tape. They went to a 6 DB look on a couple third downs. It's not like they went to that exclusively. I think they might have done that 4 or 5 times throughout the entire game. So if they didn't change anything schematically or philosophically about what they did. if you want to say that anything changed, they controlled the line of scrimmage a little bit better, even if they weren't getting to the quarterback with just 3, which it's fine. 5 guys should be able to block 3. If you don't want to send more than 3, that's what's going to happen. They were okay with that to play coverage, and it worked. It was a wise strategy. But in terms of the running game, they controlled the line of scrimmage. Nick Allen just played better. Austin Moore is just an animal every game that you can count on. I think he might – I haven't seen a better – Kansas State's played how many Big 12 teams so far? 5? I'm not sure I've seen a better linebacker this year than Austin Moore. That's not hyperbole, in my opinion. He's that good. Desmond Purnell was really good when he went in for Khalid Duke for the entire first half. Guys just played better. And Eli Huggins had a really good game at nose guard. I think he might be the best nose in the league. And like Gavin Forshea rose to the occasion with the snaps that he was given. And Jake Clifton doing what he did. I think he's played 0 inside linebacker at Kansas State until this week. So to do that in those circumstances is pretty phenomenal. It kind of makes you scratch your head at like how he's able to do that. It just shows you how smart of a football player he probably is at this point.
I thought K-State's tackling was terrific. Against TCU, there was a lot of yards after contact. Kendre Miller and Kansas State's open field tackling in this game was sensational. There were a couple times like stood out. Spencer Sanders, 1-on-1. Brendan Mott gets a sack on him. How many times do you see a guy like Sanders elude that and escape? Another time, K-State rushed 3, and Spencer Sanders gets out in the open field, and Nick Allen makes the tackle, and they have to punt right there. I just thought they were really good. And then, we talked about the linebackers, defensive line, but K-State's corners, Julius Brents and Echo Boydo were terrific. Echo Boydo was glued to his guy the entire game.
Best game of the year. He's played really good last few weeks.
Yeah, he was just terrific. He could not been he looked like he was the receiver on half those routes because he was in a position to make the catch so many times, which is why the OSU guy had to tackle him so many times and somehow didn't get flagged, as you guys mentioned earlier. So he was great. Julius Brents was really good. Josh Hayes, Kobe Savage, all the safeties K-State rotated. I can't find anybody that really played poorly for Kansas State's defense. A lot of gang tackling, flying around all over the football field. And they hold Oklahoma State to 6 of 19 on 3rd and 4th downs. The TCU game, 12 of 23, that was a problem. But in this game, K-State was consistently able to get off the field on 3rd and 4th downs and get the offense back on the field. And I know we'll talk about the offense soon as well, but those were some of the things that really stood out. And you hold Spencer Sanders to 15 of 33 passing. Actually, the OSU team is a total 15 of 33 passing. I think Sanders was 13 of 26, but 4.9 yards per pass. Just an all-around and incredible defensive performance.
My only plea, sorry to cut you off there, Kurtz, would be to the officials, like in the future, the rest of the Kansas State games. If you're an official, probably not listening to this, but if you are, I get Felix Anudike-Uzomah is really, really good. I get it's really, really hard to block him, but that doesn't mean you can just let the offensive line tackle that dude like every single play. Like I don't know if there's a guy that gets held more than Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and I don't know that it's even being called once this year. It's incredible. Like between the TCU and this past week, the amount of times that he gets held is, and I'm not just crying about officials to cry about officials. I'm typically not a guy that gets into that yuck, but man, he is held more than anyone I've ever seen.
And it should be a focal point for officials. You got the best defensive end in the conference. All right. You should see, knowing going to that game, he's going to be difficult to block. So an official should be looking for what's going on with that guy. And they're so obvious. Oklahoma State one time had the offensive tackle had his arm around Felix's neck.
That was the one that got me. Yeah.
It's like, come on, what are you looking at? I get that holding occurs a lot, but you got to at least call one or two of the obvious ones.
Yeah, agreed on that. I was just going to make the point that with defense, people talk about program wins. I remember this like a couple weeks ago with Texas. Program win, didn't really have a great day, but grinded it out against Iowa State and found a way to get that win. To me, like this speaks much more to a program win because they had time to game plan, right, around the injuries as opposed to being thrust into it with Daniel Green going out at TCU, which I think does make a big difference. So that's a part of it. The coaching, the culture, to have nobody panic or freak out about it like we were here behind microphones on podcasts. And then just young guys stepping up, seeing younger players and guys that have not played much this year, like a Jake Clifton, like a Gavin Forshea, making plays and being out there and stepping up in a time when they really needed it. to me, it's like a game that showed that K-State has some more depth than I think even we thought. Like, this program really has built depth that they did not have in 2019 or 2020 when Kleiman first took over. I just feel like we're seeing the fruits of a lot of the labor over the last 2, 3, 4 years that they've been working very, very hard on all those different. I think it's like 3-pronged. It's like coaching, culture, and just talent and guys actually out there on the field and depth of who you have. I think we probably underestimated that.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think something we probably nailed correctly in the offseason. It took a different path and journey to get here than what we were anticipating, because they're having to use a lot of different guys and maybe we didn't foresee them having to use. And there's some guys that are a lot better than we thought they'd be, and maybe a few that we thought they'd be able to deploy that they haven't been. But that's the defense. I think the entire talking point in the offseason, which, man, Kansas State's going to have a really damn good defense, and Adrian Martinez is going to be enough at quarterback to make that offense go that they can be a dangerous team. For the most part, that's kind of how this year has played out. Once Adrian got going, and now you see Will Howard going, you're getting enough at quarterback, and maybe more than you thought you'd get at quarterback, especially in reference to Will Howard. But the defense is as lights out as we thought what their upside and potential would be.
To your point, John, I mean, program win is a pretty good way to put it, because Chris Kleiman didn't use injuries as an excuse. Coaching staff didn't use injuries as an excuse all week, and we were using it as an excuse as we talked about it. We were sulking. They didn't sulk. They prepped harder than ever. Chris Kleiman talked Will Howard up for years, saying, we know this guy can be good. Look what he did. Your starting quarterback can't go. Will Howard steps in and plays the game of his life. He's played 2 terrific games back to back. They obviously have instilled confidence in him. They were patient. The reality is Will Howard's a very good quarterback in all likelihood, as it seems, and he probably just was played too early in his career out of necessity. These guys bounced back from what was a very challenging loss and all the injuries that they had to go through. So I think a program-defining win is a good way to summarize what we witnessed on Saturday.
And the first one for Kleiman over Oklahoma State, which is maybe a good sign to kind of buck that trend, because here comes 2 more that he hasn't beaten.
The only other thing I was going to mention on the defensive side, guys, I thought it was interesting. They in the second half, Khalid Duke had his hand on the ground a few times at defensive end, which I think was, and he actually was down in a 3-point stance. So I just noticed that and thought that was a little bit interesting. But they knew that OSU was just dropping back to pass at that point, so it makes sense.
Yeah, well, tell Gunnar Gundy about all that. Gunnar, is that his name? Whatever. Gundy's kid with his hands shaking. That shot where he zoomed in on his hands, he's literally just shaking, nervous. Like, man, I mean, that's what the K-State defense did yesterday. Reduced Oklahoma State to that. You brought up an interesting name there, Cole. That name is one, Will Howard. Let me just say this: Will Howard has been on a tear since I took a very stupid shot at him at the end of whatever pod that was. We're sitting in Kansas City, and it was going to TCU, and I was like, oh, at least Will Howard isn't playing quarterback this time. So I would like to just publicly say I'm a dumbass, and I'm sorry, Will, because that was, and it's clear, Cole, like what you said, the narrative about him. Like, yes, some freshman quarterbacks can come in and play very well. There are a handful of those guys that can do that and are that talented. Will was a 3-star quarterback, and is much more like the majority of quarterbacks that if you were to throw them out there their first year in the program in 2020, they're going to be exposed and they're going to look bad. And then people formulate opinions, and there's so much noise with all these podcasts and damn people on Twitter like us and everything that, it's just hard to maintain your confidence if you're a kid at that point. We've always heard about, practice will. Practice will is great. But when it comes to putting it out there on the field in games, it hadn't worked out. And I have to imagine so much of that is just in his head, like having your confidence rattled because you were thrust into such a bad situation thanks to Rico Jeffers knocking Skylar Thompson out for the 2020 season. So it's just, I think it's such a great, it's a great story, number one, along with the Adrian comeback story. You have maybe the 2 best comeback stories at quarterback in the country on the same damn roster. But it also is just it's so vindicating, I think, for Will to see that, and such a cool thing to see that play out. And it's so emblematic of kind of what the environment is today as a college football player, and what like the media and fan landscape is. And just such a testament to him for sticking it out and sticking around here at K-State. I don't have it. I will go on forever. There are not enough good things I can say about Will Howard at this point. Really, no matter what happens the rest of the year, for him to have that moment and get carried off on the shoulders of his teammates, an incredible photo from K-State that they put out with the whole crowd there, and then you can see him just being lifted up above everybody else. Hell, I felt so bad about the comment I made. I made it a point to go find this on I saw somebody on Twitter brought this up. I was going to make sure I mentioned it on the podcast. WillHowardQB.com. You can go buy Will Howard gear right now. Go buy some freaking Will Howard gear, man. Help that dude out, whatever you can do, because he deserves it all. He deserves every last bit of praise from what he's done the last 2 years.
I agree. I can't think of when it was. It was when I was with Rivals still, in K-State Online was still affiliated with Rivals. It was during the offseason. And this is not to toot my own horn, but just to kind of show that he's an easy guy to root for, just because of what he's persevered through and what he chose to do and how he chose to handle it. I said, I think I said something along the lines of, I hope Will Howard gets rewarded for his commitment, his patience, and his devotion to Kansas State. It would have been easy. Everyone's like, well, where would he have gone, right? Because I said anybody else would have probably transferred under the similar circumstances, especially, given the strife that he probably had to see, the criticism and the flack that he had to hear, that he had to see. Like, they're not immune from that. They see that stuff. They're on social media. So it's hard not to look for it or look at it. He saw all of the stuff that was said about him for 2 years. And anyone else, I already said it, would have jetted. Everyone's like, well, where would he have gone? Anyone would have taken a starting quarterback at a Power 5 quarterback with a starting quarterback experience. Maybe it wouldn't have been at the Power 5 level, but guys still go, even if it's to go down a level. Anybody would have done it. He didn't. So he deserved this moment more than the typical college kid. So it's kind of a heartwarming story. We'll see where it goes from here. If it continues to unfold, that's probably another conversation to have, because it'll be interesting how they unwind that quarterback room. Now, what I will say is they got two level-headed, mature kids that they probably can't go wrong with at this point, at least if Will Howard's momentum continues. And to a point where both would probably handle it, even if it doesn't go their way.
Well, they're great teammates. They're great kids, him and Adrian, and you could see it. I mean, DY, you were the one that actually alerted me to the photo in the locker room of Adrian and Will embracing in a hug, and you'd mentioned it was your favorite photo from yesterday, and I echo that. I mean, that really just shows what type of a teammate Adrian is. He's a great locker room guy, and Will is the same way. And I just feel so great for Will Howard. Like, I've been critical of Will Howard's play in his career at Kansas State. To your point, most guys would have been gone and would have jetted from Kansas State after the criticism and what he had to deal with and just want a fresh start. And he could have easily gone. He's 6'4", 6'5". All right. Like, he's got physically imposing and would have had chances to go play. He had offers from every Ivy League school practically. He could have easily went back home, probably played some Ivy League football, got a great education if he wanted, but he stuck it out here. And it's hard not to feel just tremendously compassionate and grateful for what he was able to put out there on Saturday, and to have that moment and a win was pretty special. And, look, we'll talk about it more of what this means going forward. I mean, for one, it means you feel a heck of a lot better about next season, right? Is next year as much of a rebuilding year as we thought? Probably not, because you don't have to rush Avery Johnson out there. We have now seen enough from Will Howard, in my opinion, that we know the physical talent is there. I just needed to see it back-to-back games. And to do it against an Oklahoma State team that knows him well, that's seen him twice already, and to put up that type of performance, that game plan for him, they knew he was likely to play, that makes it all the more important to me and special of a performance. So, yeah, we can make that talking point down the road, but it certainly does alleviate some pressure going into 2023.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. I mean, I even think I was talking to Chris Nelson about this at the game. I was like, all right, so 2023, if it's going to be Will Howard's team, I mean, that certainly looks like it's possible now. But I was like, does 2024 get tricky? Because he still has that eligibility. And then Avery Johnson, second year in the program. Anyway, good problems to have. Conversation for a different day, that piece of it anyway. But let me just say this. Will Howard is a much better man than I. I think that's like what we were all kind of dancing around right here. Will Howard is
everyone too after the game.
Yeah, but much, much better man than I. And just continues to take the high road. That post-game interview, was just deflecting everything to his teammates. I mean, just much, much better man than I could ever be. So, I mean, kudos to Will on that. And I mean, as far as what he was doing, I think Kleiman made this point in the post-game press conference. It's a 48-0 win. K-State, I don't think, was going to be shut down or denied in any way on Saturday, especially with what Oklahoma State brought to the table. But in a blowout game like that, if you want to circle one play, I mean, it's 4th and 10. It's the first drive of the game, 4th and 10. Deuce Vaughn, of all people, gets a false start penalty, and it's a little frustrating. That was Swanson had the drop right on that drive. So you're sitting there like, man, this is a drive that had a lot of promise. Now it's 4th and 10, kind of in no man's land. What are you going to do here? And Will slides the pocket, sets his feet, and throws a freaking dime to Cade Warner on 4th and 10 into the end zone. I mean, it doesn't get more clutch than that. It doesn't get more just on target. Just great mechanics, great play, took some balls. I mean, just all of it was amazing. And that play really set the tone for the game, when if that doesn't go your way, you may be in for much more of a dogfight than what it turned out to be.
Yeah, he had another 4th down throw too, where I think Hadley Panther missed a block, and the guy came through unevaded, and stood in there, took that pressure, and delivered a strike to Malik Knowles for a first down, I believe. And I think that was probably at least 4th and medium. So showing that the game's definitely slowed down. You have to like that. That's a great example of that. You know what? Chris Kleiman deserves some praise, right? This is why his players love playing for him. His unabashed confidence, which can come across in media settings to fans as pretty annoying sometimes. I get it, because he will talk up players that are really going through it. Nick Allen last week was really going through it. Hayden Gillum a few weeks ago was really going through it. Will Howard the last 2 years were really going through it. And he sticks by his guys, and he will not back down from his, confidence in him and trying to talk them up, because he knows that players play better when they feel good about themselves. And I think that confidence was rewarded by Will Howard's performance. I think Chris Kleiman being the guy that kind of sticks in there for Will, and Will even said it, Chris Kleiman stick there for him meant a lot. And that's probably played a role in Will not leaving, because he knew the head coach believed in him still, and also probably had a part in Will's performance. And it's why guys that are playing a lot of football also don't leave Kansas State. I'm not saying that won't happen in the future with the advent of the transfer portal and what it's doing to many teams. And it's happened to Kansas State, but in terms of most of the time, the guys that are really playing, it hasn't hurt them. It probably will in the future. It's just, the age of college athletics and era that we are in. But for the most part, they have a loyalty to Chris Kleiman because he has a loyalty to them.
John, you mentioned the 4th and 10 to start the game there, 38-yard TD pass to Cade Warner. Look, last week it was a story of Kansas State. I mean, look, let's be honest. The story of this game going into it was best third down defense in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, at 25% conversion rate allowed against the worst third down offense in the Big 12, K-State, which is 114th in the country at around 31% on third down conversions. And last week against TCU, the offense couldn't stay on the field. And look, you look at the final box score, K-State's 5 of 15 on third down, which doesn't sound great, right? But they converted all 3 fourth downs. So they're 8 of 18 between third and fourth down against the best third down defense in the league. But let's go through just a list of the third and fourth downs K-State faced in this game. There was no gimmies, really. 4th and 10, 3rd and 5, K-State gets a PI on Oklahoma State because Will Howard's willingness to throw it downfield to Malik Knowles draws a pass interference. 3rd and 6, 31-yard touchdown pass to Phillip Brooks. 3rd and 8, 41-yard touchdown pass to Cade Warner on a perfect slip screen call. Hell of a play call by Colin Klein there, and just didn't have anybody out in front to even get Cade Warner. 3rd and 10, they get an 8-yard pass to Warner. All right. And that gets them into a 4th and 2 at the 24, manageable. They get it. I think that's the 4th and 2 you're mentioning, DY, where they ran a unique play where they motioned Sennett out and ran kind of a slip screen to Malik Knowles, and he gets 4 yards on that play, which was another unique play call that we'd seen.
Oh, that's a different one. Mine was the other one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. 3rd and 9, 13-yard pass to Malik Knowles. 3rd and 6, 5-yard run, gets them in a 4th and 1. Will Howard converts on a running play on 4th and 1. So my point is they faced a lot of challenging 3rd and 4th down situations, and they converted most of them. Against that defense, that's not easy to do.
I was probably thinking of the 3rd and 9 to Knowles then. Yeah.
Yeah, that might have been it. And Oklahoma State led the Big 12 coming into the game with 8.6 tackles for loss, number 7 in the country. 1 tackle for loss Saturday against Kansas State. 1 negative play. And Brock Martin played. They had all of their weapons on the defensive line. Colin Oliver, Tyler Lacey, Brock Martin, all their best defensive linemen. They were out there.
Yeah.
They couldn't do anything.
No, that kind of goes back to our point for the TCU game, which I guess never really bared a whole lot of fruit, but Kansas State was one of the better teams in preventing havoc, them and TCU both. So that showed up against Oklahoma State. That's a big thing. You kind of made me think about that defensive pass interference that Malik Knowles drew. I just wanted to make that observation. That was probably one of the times where if they didn't throw that flag, it wouldn't have bothered me. Like the flag that they did throw, which is that one, I didn't think that was an obvious defensive pass interference.
Well, and Cole said because Will was willing to throw that ball. I love the call. I love the willingness to throw it. I loved everything about that. And that takes me to another point here. I mean, I have so many points I want to make. We've got it. Colin Klein. I love what you said about the play calling. I mean, how about the play to Deuce, which was, for the touchdown at the end of the first half, another huge play. And it was just so nifty. They shift. It was like Andy Reid style almost, right? Totally shift. And they get just enough hesitation from moving Deuce around to where he has just like a half step on, I think, a linebacker or safety, whoever it is that's coming out there. And I mean, it takes a perfect throw and an unbelievable catch, but they get it for what was a massive play. I mean, if you're having any thought of TCU 2.0 happening, it would be not converting that play there at the end of the half. So, I mean, Colin deserves a lot of credit there. But Malik Knowles, man, Cole, you tweeted out the stats of what he's been the last 2 weeks. With Will Howard, Malik Knowles suddenly is the guy that we've been waiting for years. I mean, this is the potential realized for Malik now, because Will is a guy willing more so than Adrian to push the ball downfield, and not, Adrian been utilizing him some, but Will Howard is going to him early and often. Colin is scheming up ways to get him open, use his talent. And we always know you get an engaged Malik Knowles, it's a totally different ball game. And we've seen so many, he's knocking down passes that should be intercepted. There's the play he catches that almost goes for the touchdown at the end of the half, where he fights and fights until everybody damn near pushes him in the end zone. I mean, he's a different guy. I mean, he is the guy that I've wanted to see for 4 years now, and it has all happened with Will being the quarterback. So there's just so much going on there.
K. Warner almost had 100 yards too. I mean, Knowles at 8 for 113. Warner had 97. It was almost the second time this year they had two receivers go over 100 yards. I think the first time was actually Iowa State, which is ironically they only scored 10 points, but they had better numbers against Iowa State than anyone's had against Iowa State this year, at least up until this past weekend. And they left points on the board that game. But that just shows you, in a little bit, I think the passing game was going to come along no matter what. I think there was a positive trajectory, but I think Will Howard has accelerated it.
Yeah, Knowles, 17 receptions, 290 yards in his last 3 games, 17 yards per reception over that time frame. Already now has surpassed his career high for receiving yards in a season and receptions. And there's still 4 regular season games left to play. I think we did the over-under prediction for Malik Knowles right around 600, 700 yards before the year. And he's now trending toward right around that number. He certainly looks to be very engaged. And it's not just, Malik Knowles, Phillip Brooks, 8 catches his last 3 games for 210 yards. And you mentioned Warner the last few games. I mean, they're utilizing their weapons. Maybe the receiver room isn't as bad as we thought it was, because now they're actually finding the opening guys and willing to stretch it downfield. I mean, the Phillip Brooks touchdown was a great route yesterday where he peeled off with Sennett and, showed some of the different route tree combinations that they're willing to run. And I thought that was tremendous. And John, when we talk about willingness to throw the ball downfield, I mean, how many incompletions did K-State throw downfield too? But they were willing to throw it vertical. I mean, I can count at least 5 that they threw it 25 plus yards downfield yesterday, and they may not have been caught, but showing that willingness to stretch the field opens up the running game for Deuce Vaughn to have more holes. And I thought Deuce Vaughn had more holes yesterday, more gaping, bigger holes than he's had in a while to run through, even without the threat of the quarterback run game. And I think that's largely because the play calling wasn't predictable. They were stretching the field. And how many times K-State, even up 35-0, 38-0, when you're thinking, just run the ball, drain the clock, they were dropping back to pass the ball. I mean, they were throwing the ball on first down, second down, not just trying to melt the clock. I mean, they were that confident. In the end, it's about as balanced as you can get. 37 running plays, 37 passes, 50-50 right down the middle. That's a heck of a game for Kansas State. When you win a game 48-0 and you still throw it 37 times, that says Colin Klein's got a lot of confidence in his quarterback.
I like how it was exactly 50-50, 37-37. And Cole said, it's about as balanced. No, that isn't.
Yeah. Well, look, I was just trying to be a little bit sarcastic there. But, yeah, and then it leads to a time of possession of 35 minutes to 24 minutes in the game, which was an important factor. And to the point of stretching the field, K-State now, in its last 2 games under Will Howard, 13 completed passes for over 20 yards. They had 10 completed passes over 20 yards in their first 6 games combined. So it's more explosives in the passing game, not relying as heavily on the running game. And that has resulted in an average of, let's see, I tweeted this out earlier. I just want to make sure I find it again because I want to make sure I'm accurate as I stall here. But K-State's averaging 9.8 yards per pass over its last 3 games, which is the 7th highest mark in the country during that time and the best in the Big 12. K-State's offense is averaging 6.9 yards per play in 5 Big 12 games. And just for context of how good that is, UCLA ranks 7th in the country for the entire season at 6.9 yards per play right now. So the offense is showing a lot of explosiveness.
So let me just pose this question then. Who's trotting out there at quarterback Saturday at 6:00 on FS1? Because I'm not gonna lie, I mean it's got to be Will, right? You can't stop this train now. We'll have time to break it down and hear what they're gonna say on Tuesday. And
here's my era. I'll go. So one, I don't necessarily envy the situation that Chris Kleiman is in. It's going to be a slope that he'll have to navigate, but I think he has another week of this. I think. And some of this is probably not a facade, right? I'm going to use the word facade, but it doesn't have to be. Adrian Martinez, according to Chris Kleiman, admitted that he just didn't feel good enough about what he was able to do when he went through warmups before the game, and that's when they went with the decision to play Will Howard. So obviously they had every intention of playing Adrian Martinez at that point. Had he give them the go-ahead that, hey, I can do everything that you're going to ask out of me. But he says, he was honest and admitted that he didn't think he could. So I would assume to hear something similar this week, whether it's true or not. I bet it might be. I mean, if Adrian Martinez couldn't go last week, at best he's questionable in a game time decision again this week, and it's probably the verbiage that we will hear throughout the week. But I would use that with Will Howard playing as well as he can. You can buy another week to get Adrian Martinez healthy. You don't have to play him because of how well Will Howard's playing. And if Will Howard, for whatever reason, does hit a wall a little bit against Texas and the offense stalls and there's just no fire there and they need a spark, guess what? Adrian Martinez is there in your back pocket. That's how I would manage it this week.
Yeah, where I'm at is you now have seen Will Howard do enough to where you don't put Adrian Martinez on the field until you know he's absolutely 100% healthy. There's no reason to risk him. Get him back to 100% health where he feels comfortable being his total self on the football field, and that is being able to utilize his legs and his mobility. So get him healthy because you can still play two more games of Will Howard and maintain his redshirt status, which by all accounts he'd like to redshirt, which actually then gives him 3 years of eligibility left, right, DY? If he does redshirt?
He would have if he would redshirt, I think he would have 2 years left, right?
Well, he had the COVID season.
Oh, three.
So it didn't count. So, yeah. So you can kind of manage this. It's a difficult situation because love Adrian. Would hate to see him lose his starting job because of an injury like this and want him to have the most success. But at the same time, Big 12 title aspirations are on the line. And so, I mean, I'm even to the point where if Will is the best option, you have to go for the Big 12 title this year. If that means burning his red shirt.
Oh, forget who cares about
you burn the red shirt. Yeah. Now you got to make sure Will's fine with that. And I'm sure he would be.
No, he would. I think the reason why the red shirt has come into play this year is because last year he could have done the selfish thing, which probably wouldn't have even been selfish. He'd burn a red shirt just to play in the Texas game because they didn't have a starting quarterback available.
Yeah, but I mean, to the end point, I just make sure that Adrian is 100% healthy before you put him back on the field. So if that means resting him against Texas, you can kind of protect Adrian too in doing that, right? By using the injury. If he couldn't go last week, you can protect the reputation and everything, and still give Will another week and see how he does in what will be a monstrous game against the Longhorns under the lights.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I mean, you don't, and I would imagine that this is how it's going to play out. I mean, I heard the only thing that concerned me a little bit on that is I heard Kleiman at one point slip in there, like, yes, Adrian said he couldn't go, like, and we felt like this was going to be more a game where we would have to do a lot of damage through the air, so it made sense to have Will out there. And I was like, okay, well, I hope it's not like you look at Texas' defense and be like, they're going to be a little more susceptible to the quarterback run or something and rush Adrian back too early because of that and stop the Will Howard momentum. It's tricky. But I agree. I don't think it's that tricky this week. I think it probably gets more tricky after Texas.
I still think he had two personalities, very well equipped and mature enough to handle it appropriately to not let the season get out of
I think Adrian's a good enough leader and a good enough teammate that he'll be honest. And if he doesn't feel he's 100% and he knows Will Howard is the best thing for Kansas State as a program heading into that Texas game, he'll be honest, because of what Chris Kleiman said yesterday, right before kick, is when Adrian was just like, I don't think I can be 100% and give it a go. Will's the best thing for this football team in this game. Like, Adrian could have went out there and tried to force it, but he didn't. And I just think, from a character standpoint, Adrian's everything you would want to be able to handle this situation. And I think he'll handle it well. And I think you roll Will Howard out there against Texas.
I honestly also credit a lot of Will Howard's success that he's been able to kind of reverse his fortunes, so to speak, at least in the last two games. We'll see if that continues, is to being around Adrian Martinez. It has probably helped him to kind of been able to commiserate a little bit with a guy that basically was dealt a similar hand at Nebraska as Will was dealt in the first years of his career at Kansas State in terms of the struggle and overcoming it.
That's why that picture of that hug's pretty special too, because you got two of the more criticized quarterbacks, especially in the Big 12 and the country, and embracing, because they're two, you mentioned it earlier, you guys did two of the better redemption stories in the same locker room. It's pretty special.
A lot of it, again, I think goes back to just the work that they've done since 2020 to just retool the entire culture of the locker room, period, to be able to have a locker room that can not be choosing sides, not be, I even think back to it. I'm not trying to take a shot. This is not designed to be a shot at Bill Snyder's program, certainly. But, two quarterback things are just so tricky. I mean, it's like Sam's Waters, taking all my stupid shtick out of it, like that was pretty tough at the time. I remember covering the team. It was like, I don't know. There was a receiver at one point. I'm not even going to throw out a name, but that was kind of like, made a comment after that Texas game they lost in 2013. Like, we don't know why the other guy wasn't playing more. It's very easy for a locker room to splinter like that. You don't have that here. You don't have that here at all. And at one point in 2020, I'll never forget that Iowa State post-game press conference where Kleiman said, like, basically admitted, like, yeah, we've got some locker room issues. Like, we've got to figure this out. And they had, you guys, again, I won't mention names. You guys know some of the dudes that were problems back then that are now out of the program, and they took it seriously to go after the character aspect of this. And they've obviously done a phenomenal job in a couple of years of repairing that.
Yeah. And I was going to say, even the Dalton Schuyler thing was a little messy.
So. Yeah.
Oh, that was completely mismanaged.
Just a bit.
What a complete debacle. And I think we were at Morgantown at West Virginia when in 2018, when Bill ripped Schuyler to the media about the quarterback sneak and basically called him soft. And before the Iowa State game, and Ames still trying to see if Alex Delton injured could give it a go. And then Schuyler balls out. Look, I could name all the names, John. You want me to? 2013 was Tremaine Thompson, right? That was not as a bad character guy. Okay. Not a bad, to be clear, but he was questioning why the other guy was playing
right now.
Yeah.
Listen, I love Tremaine, and I loved him for it at the time because I was a Daniel Sams guy, and he was like, "Why isn't Daniel Sams out here?"
Yeah. Just a couple more numbers, real quick, guys, that I'll throw out. Now at home, K-State's forced 14 turnovers, only turned the ball over twice. It's pretty darn good. Kind of remarkable that all 14 turnovers now are at home. That narrative continues to build. We talked about it heading into the game, and then the one group that we didn't really talk much about that I wanted to give a shout out to was the offensive line. Thought they played really good on Saturday and opened up holes in the running game, but also protected Will. If you drop back 37 times against that OSU defense and don't get sacked, they're doing something right. And K-State now, believe it or not, 13th in the country in sack percentage allowed with 3.1%. They allowed a sack rate of 7% last year. Only 3.1 out. Granted, again, part of that's elusiveness. Yeah, they're getting better. Part of that also is Adrian earlier in the year eluding some of the sacks that would have normally been made. But it's also a credit to them. They haven't allowed a sack against TCU or OSU. That's 58 pass attempts without allowing a sack the last 2 games.
They've redeemed themselves. Talk about redemption. They've redeemed themselves. Interesting question. I know we're probably tailing off here at the end of the podcast, but look, I think Texas is probably one of the tougher matchups left on the schedule for Kansas State, but they do get them at home. So, and you got Kansas at home. You got to go to Baylor. You got to go to West Virginia. Is Texas the game you are worried the most about?
Can I throw in real quick too? Just shout out to Hadley Panzer for absolutely removing a soul from a body on that was the Cade Warner screen, I think, right? Like just whipped the guy and then stood over him. Like Nelson caught that and was like, dude, you got to watch the replay of Hadley Panzer. And I saw
there was another one where Ben Sinnott took someone's
he did.
On a wham play to Deuce on the handoff there. So.
Yeah, Brock Heward called it a wham play on the rewatch. Brock Heward, for those of you who haven't rewatched the game, really highlighted the Hadley Panzer block. He absolutely loved that. They came back from break and he was highlighting that. And I got to give a shout out to Hadley Panzer's family. They came by our tailgate down in Fort Worth. Nicest people you'll ever meet. Had a great conversation with Hadley's dad. How grateful is Kansas State. Yeah. It was enjoyable to have them around. Shout out to Hadley. And the only other thing I wanted to mention from the broadcast, John, you mentioned the touchdown pass to Deuce on that 4th and 1 there at the end. Brock Heward called it the best pass of Will Howard's career. Just the ball placement. You could only put it in a little window, and he put it in the perfect window. Heck of a play by Deuce still too, but there was not a lot of space there, and he put it in the perfect spot. So
if you miss, that's a pick six. That's not an incompletion.
Exactly.
That's a pick six. So,
yeah.
It's not a whole lot of running backs that are making that kind of catch either.
Yeah, no, you're right. To be able to flip your body, like to not the way Deuce catches it and then rotates his body so he doesn't trap it on the ground, right, and lands on his back. That's just an incredible play by Deuce as well. DY, to your question.
Wait, hang on. Can I throw? I got one more thing on the game.
Yep.
Kicker. Ty Zentner gets a couple field goals. And look, I will just say this, and nothing against Chris Tennant. Ty Zentner looked confident, and the ball looks like a freaking field goal should look when it came off his leg. I know those weren't impressively long field goals or anything, but just the way that looked. Because Tennant, it's like even when he had been making them, they're sneaking in. They're kind of ugly. Like, I don't know. I know it's a lot on Ty Zentner's plate, but I felt a hell of a lot more comfortable watching him out there kicking the ball.
I mean, he's certainly got the job as long as he does that. He's the kicker for the foreseeable future. It's not a long-term solution either. I hope that folks remember that. This is his final 4 or 5 games. He leaves too, but he kicked a Butler, so this is nothing new to him. What I will say is he's going to have a tired leg before it's all said and done. I know that sounds weird. Like, what's 2 or 3 more kicks? But I mean, it's also pressure kicks too, and you're also kicking off and punting, and even just 1% more tired. It's a little bit of a shorter kickoff that can be returned, or it's a little bit of a shorter punt that can be returned. Things you have to take into consideration.
Can you have Tennant handle kickoff? He's got a big leg.
Yeah, I mean that's something maybe they should consider. I would think as well. I wouldn't be against it at all. And people think, what's 3 more kicks in a game? But it's seriously, if you've never been a kicker or a punter, I wouldn't judge.
Yeah, I mean, I go out and try to kick on a tee to my 5-year-old, and I feel like I'm going to pull my hamstring half the time when I go to do it. So I can't imagine. Tennant, he's 6'5", 230 too. It'd be a nice little linebacker going down the field on kickoff duty. Have a kicker 6'5" going down the field. To the point, all of Zentner's kicks were right down the middle too. I mean, could not have drilled them any better than he did. I actually was okay trying a couple of those field goals where K-State didn't punch it in, because I wanted to see how Zentner's leg looked from a field goal perspective, right? And so it was good to see that. I got a solution to rest him. Just eliminate punting. How about just don't even punt the ball the rest of the year, guys? Just keep scoring. And
there was a point in the first drive where Kansas State offense started to hum a little bit, and they kept getting a first down on either first down or second down. And I looked at Jimmy, KSU fan in the press box, is like, you don't have to worry about your third down offense if you never get to third down.
It's like, yeah, what's the guy on Twitter, the GIF just pointing to his head? Yeah. All right, DY, it's a great question that you had about Texas.
Yep.
I would say, I mean, watching Baylor against Tech now, that game in Waco, Baylor's not going away. To me, it's between those two games. The thing that scares me is, I mean, it's Bijan, because Quinn Ewers on the road has not looked very good so far this year. I think you can rattle him and get after him, but Bijan's a problem. I don't know what Daniel Green's status is going to be next week. The linebackers stepped up and played great against Oklahoma State, but Bijan is legit. I mean, I love Deuce Vaughn to death, but boy, Bijan is.
I agree.
Bijan's that dude, I think, in the Big 12.
You also can hope that maybe Steve Sarkisian does what he did against Oklahoma State, gets away from Bijan a little too much, and that gives you a shot. Because I think if they stick with him, they probably beat the Pokes in Stillwater, which would have changed things rather drastically had that happened. And it probably unfolded perfectly for Kansas State in the manner that it did. Now that they've defeated Oklahoma State, that Baylor game. Here's my thing. Kansas State's defense has been pretty good every game for the most part, but they are so much better at home for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you got the crowd behind you that can play a large role in it and make it difficult for opposing teams when they are in Bill Snyder Family Stadium in Manhattan, Kansas. But Kansas State's, what they're able to do from an offense and defense execution standpoint is much better at home so far this year, the Tulane game notwithstanding. So I tend to want to be concerned about the game in Waco a little bit more, especially since they're on the upward trajectory. And I think they are better coached and will do the right things to win. West Virginia is not going to be an easy game either. TCU got all they wanted to handle in Morgantown.
Well, I mean, Kansas will not. But let me just go ahead and say this for the right. Kansas will not be an easy game at the end of the year either. I mean, those MFers don't quit. They don't. I mean, they're tough. They're tough. Yeah.
Well, a few things here. Kansas is going to be in all likelihood in desperation mode, potentially getting to a bowl that last game against their rival. So they're going to throw everything out on the field against Kansas State, and a potential possibility to wreck K-State's Big 12 title aspirations. A rival would love to do that. So that's going to be challenging if that's the situation that arises there. West Virginia, be curious where their season goes now. They're 3-5.
There's so much
chat. Yeah, they are better at home, but there's not going to be a lot of fans there for that game in all likelihood by that time in the season. So we'll see where they're at. Watching the Baylor Tech game last night, I was rooting for Baylor. I was rooting for Tech. You want Baylor just out of the race completely. And if they get a third loss there, especially against Tech, you've already got the tiebreaker over them. You beat them, so you don't have to worry about them where they go from here. But Baylor does have to go to OU and Texas still. And OU looks like they're coming back a little bit. So there's a strong likelihood that Baylor at least gets that third loss, even if it's not Kansas State that hands it to them. I think Texas is better than Oklahoma State. If you look at the numbers, Texas has a top 20 offense in points per drive. Oklahoma State was 34th. Oklahoma State was 61st in defense points per drive. Texas is top 30. 5.1 yards per carry. That's 19th in the country for Texas. Oklahoma State was 3.7 yards per carry, which is 91st. Areas that they might look to expose K-State with Bijan if Daniel Green can't give it a go, to your point. So from a matchup perspective, it's going to be harder. That's not to diminish the win over Oklahoma State, which is still gigantic. But I would lean toward Texas. Now, I'm concerned about the Baylor game and always was down in Waco. But if you beat Texas, you're in a good situation where you can afford to lose that game still at Baylor, because I think Baylor is going to drop a third game. Now, you're not saying you want to lose to Baylor, obviously, but if you beat Texas, you then have tiebreakers over Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas. I mean, it's really, you probably need to root for TCU the rest of the way if you're a K-State fan, because I don't see any way TCU doesn't make it at this point. So just have them beat everybody else in the Big 12 the rest of the way. And if K-State can go 3-1 with a win over Texas being one of those wins, they're a lock for Arlington, obviously.
Yeah, here's what I will say about Texas. If you want to come up with an argument that Texas is not the scariest proposition left on the Kansas State schedule, as they're still at a point in the Steve Sarkisian tenure, and I know he's only in year 2, I want to say, especially from the years and years of culture of what has been established in Austin over time. That's not particularly pleasing to their fans, is I still don't know if they understand what winning football looks at the end of games and on the road.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, this is a November night game in Manhattan. That does not typically spell success for Texas generally. With what you think of that program?
And we've got Baylor at Oklahoma at 2:00 this Saturday. So we're going to find out. Yeah. We're going to find out a lot about if Baylor drops that game. K-State beats Texas. You're going to be sitting at a pretty darn good spot by Saturday night at 10:00 in the Big 12 standing. So we'll see what unfolds. Iowa State and the West Virginia and the Toilet Bowl at 2:30.
Oh, that's another question. Does Iowa State win a Big 12 game?
That's an Ames. So
probably, yeah. Somebody. But I will say this: I didn't actually have a chance to watch a ton of Big 12 football yesterday because we were just out. It was 2:30 is like the perfect tailgate time, so it was just out hanging out, and then at night. But the funniest play I have seen in college football in a long time is the Oklahoma fake field goal to just flip it to the sprinting kicker. DY, it is. Nelly was telling me about it. And I was like, oh, that's okay. That's funny. They got a fake field goal for a touchdown. And then I saw it and I was like, oh my God. And they immediately cut to Matt Campbell just losing his bleep on the sideline. I mean, it was.
Oh no.
I mean, Iowa State special teams, I guess, aside from the game against Kansas State, is just a complete disaster every week.
Matt Campbell said at a press conference last week that they've gotten better every year or something like that. He said they keep getting better. It was something to that effect. Yeah.
That West Virginia Iowa State game, the only thing that interests me in that, I just mentioned West Virginia quitting on the year. They lose that game to Iowa State and they're 3-6. I think the game in Morgantown becomes a little easier for K-State. I think that's a West Virginia team that starts to check it in. If they lose to an 0-5 team in the Big 12, all we're going to hear is fire Neil Brown talk out of there.
It probably does. I mean, you're probably going to hear that regardless. I think they're at the point where Texas Tech was with Matt Wells, where no amount of wins is going to make them feel any better for whatever reason.
Could you guys imagine ever pushing for Neil Brown to be the head coach at Kansas State? Gosh, what idiots those people were that were like, oh, hire Neil Brown. I mean, yeah. And Venables. I mean,
Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell, anybody?
Florida State's on to come up a little, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah. Norvell, I guess the jury's still kind of out. But anyway. Okay, well, I forgot at the beginning because I was so excited about how everything went down to give a shout out to our friends at Holiday Distillery, 360 Vodka, Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon. Make sure to stock up on that. It's a night game. It's Texas. K-State's in the top 15 now. What more do you want? All right, throw some vodka down your throat, some Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon, and let's make Bill Snyder Family Stadium really freaking loud on Saturday.
Did you get a ticket yet?
I've got some leads. I was
going to say, this could be your
I've got a lead in the suite.
No, you don't want to be in the suite. You want to be with the people.
You got to be honest. You got to get the ticket you had last week. You can be a little superstitious. Tell Don to come through.
Okay. Well, I guess if Don's listening, I mean, hey, I'm available.
Don, do you have 5 extras so I can move my family over there too? And then I can go sit with John as well. I don't want to be greedy, but just 5 more, so I can abandon my Section 11 seats to mosey on over there. That'd be great. And hey, we got the college football playoff poll coming out on Tuesday. Gene Taylor on the committee. Where do you think he puts K-State? 4th, 5th?
I don't know. I'm a little. Everyone. Tennessee. Where are we at? I mean, I would flip flop. That's my only issue with the AP and the coaches poll that came out this week. I just flip flop K-State and Tennessee, and then.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could see that, John. I think.
By the way, I know this isn't an SEC pod, but Tennessee. I'm probably not high enough on them. I just assumed Kentucky would play with them the week ahead of the Georgia game. Good Lord.
I did too. You know what else comes?
DY. What have they played Oklahoma State? I don't think so. Okay. By the way, K-State should not be number 1. How could we possibly say that? Tulane obviously is number 1, and then K-State number 2. That's
ahead of TCU, huh?
Who?
TCU? No.
I don't know, TCU and what? Who? Yeah. Hey, you know what else comes this week? I'm sure Jed's like, would you idiots just wrap this show up so I can go? You know what else comes this week? Maction, baby.
Basketball.
well, I've already tweeted that too. We got
Coach
the Cats
Tang.
against
Wait. Yeah,
Washburn.
when is the first exhibition game?
Tuesday,
Washburn.
Holy hell. Okay.
Let's hope
All
for
right.
that. Yeah, we're going to take out all of our anger from Fort Hays State a couple years ago out on Washburn on Tuesday night.
John, were you at the triple overtime game with Huggins
No.
against Washburn? I was
I was not.
Well, we won't. I'm not worried about that happening with Coach Tang and the staff and the boys. I think it'll be just fine. But I'm excited to watch that.
I'm pretty sure I did watch Jim Woldridge lose to the EA Sports All-Stars one time.
Yeah, I watched Jim Woldridge lose to Western Carolina as well. I watched Bruce Weber lose to Northern Colorado in person and
Fort Hays.
I wasn't there for that one. No. Anyways, I digress. You know how much K-State basketball means to me that I'm going to have to watch it over Maction on Tuesday night, the debut of Tuesday Night Maction. But you know what? I got Wednesday Night Maction too. So it's going to be, I am loaded up for this week, boys. We got K-State football under the lights. We got K-State. I'm going to be drinking so much.
Going to be hitting that Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon, huh?
I'm going to empty so many bottles of that because we got Tuesday, Wednesday Night Maction. We got K-State hoops. We got K-State football under the lights as a top 15 team in America. I'm in great spirits right now. A lot better than that drive home from Fort Worth on Sunday last week.
Emphasis on the spirit part of that. You got some great spirits going for your great spirits. And that's why they pay us the big bucks, folks. All right. This is a lot more fun than last week. Appreciate you all listening. For Jed Marshall behind the scenes, Cole Manbeck, Derek Young, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to 3 Mile. We'll see you later this week.